My parents told everyone I died in a car accident when I was 15 years old. They held a funeral, a closed casket. My whole family mourned me. My little sister Grace cried at my grave every birthday, but I was not dead. I was alive, hidden. For 20 years I stayed away, until I got a wedding invitation addressed to my real name. My sister was getting married, and someone knew I was alive, so I made a decision. I was going to that wedding, and I was going to tell everyone the truth. If you want to know what happened, subscribe to her words right now because this story will leave you speechless. My name is Emma. I am 35 years old, and I need to tell you about the day I came back from the dead. The day I walked into my sister's wedding after 20 years. The day I exposed my parents in front of 200 people. This is my story. When I was 15 years old, my parents made me disappear. They did not kill me, but they made everyone believe I was dead. And for 20 years I let them, because I was afraid. Because I was alone. Because I thought no one would believe me. But everything changed when I got that wedding invitation. Let me tell you what really happened. When I was 15, I was a normal teenager. I lived in a big house with my parents, Karen and Richard. My little sister Grace was only 10. We were a wealthy family. My father owned a successful business. My mother was involved in every charity in town. Everyone thought we were perfect. But we were not. My parents were controlling. They controlled what I wore, what I said, who I talked to, where I went. Everything. I was not allowed to have opinions. I was not allowed to question them. I was supposed to smile and be the perfect daughter, but I was not perfect. I asked questions. I pushed back. And that made them angry. One day, I was looking for a pen in my father's office. I opened a drawer. Inside I found documents. Financial documents. I did not understand all of it, but I saw names, numbers, transfers. My father was taking money from his business partner. Stealing. I did not know what to do. So I confronted. I asked my father about the documents. He got very quiet, very cold. He asked me where I found them. I told him. He said I was wrong, that I did not understand business, that I needed to forget what I saw. But I could not forget. I told him if he did not stop, I would tell someone. That was my mistake. 2 days later, my mother made me tea. She said I looked tired. She said the tea would help me sleep. I drank it. I remember feeling dizzy. I remember my mother helping me to my room. I remember lying down on my bed. And then everything went black. When I woke up, I was not in my room. I was in a strange bed, in a strange house. I panicked. Then I heard footsteps. The door opened. It was my Aunt Lisa, my father's sister. She lived in a different state. I had only met her a few times. Aunt Lisa told me to calm down. She told me to sit. She told me something that changed my life forever. She said your parents sent you here. They paid me to hide you. They told everyone you died in a car accident. There was a funeral yesterday. Everyone thinks you are dead. I stared at her. I could not breathe. I could not speak. Dead? A funeral? Why? Aunt Lisa explained. She said my parents could not risk me telling anyone about the documents, about the money. They could not risk the scandal, so they made me disappear. They staged that my body was so badly burned they could not have an open casket. They held a funeral. My little sister Grace stood at my grave and cried. And I was here, alive, hidden. I asked Aunt Lisa what happens now. She said I had two choices. I could stay with her and stay dead, or I could go back and risk what my parents might do. She said if I went back, they might do something worse. They might actually hurt me. She said she took their money because she needed it. She would help me start over. I was 15 years old. I was terrified. I chose to stay dead. I lived with Aunt Lisa for 3 years. She homeschooled me. When I turned 18, I legally changed my last name. I went to community college, then university. I studied business. I started my own online marketing company. I built a life, a good life. But I thought about Grace every single day. My little sister, She thought I was dead. She had been mourning me for years, and I could not tell her the truth. I did not contact my family for 20 years. I did not look them up. I did not go back to my hometown. I stayed away. I stayed dead. Expensive paper. I opened it. Inside was a wedding invitation for Grace Parker, my sister. She was getting married. The invitation was addressed to Emma Carter, my real name, my birth name, the name I had not used in 20 years. There was a note inside, handwritten. It said, "I know you're alive. Grace deserves to know. Come to the wedding." It was signed Sarah. I did not know who Sarah was, but she knew who I was. And she knew I was alive. I sat at my desk holding that invitation. My hands were shaking. Someone had found me. After 20 years, someone knew the truth, and they wanted me to come to the wedding, to face my family, to tell Grace I was alive. I looked up my family online. My parents were still in the same house, still wealthy, still respected. My mother ran a charity for grieving parents. And Grace was beautiful, successful, happy, getting married at the family estate, 200 guests. I thought about Grace standing at my grave every birthday, talking to a headstone, mourning a sister who was not dead. I thought about my parents lying for 20 years, living their perfect life while I stayed hidden. And I made a decision. I booked a flight, I bought a dress. And I decided I was going to that wedding. I was going to walk in. I have not been back to my hometown in 20 years. I told myself I never would. But the morning I landed at that airport, something shifted inside me. I felt like Emma Carter again. Not the name I had been using for 2 decades. Not the successful businesswoman I had built from scratch. Just Emma, the girl who disappeared. Finally coming home. I rented a car. I drove slowly through streets I used to know by heart. The high school I attended before I vanished. The ice cream shop where Grace and I went every Friday after school. The church where my parents stood in front of everyone and pretended to bury me. I drove past all of it without stopping. I checked into a hotel 2 miles from the family estate. I had one night to think. I sat in that room for 4 hours staring at the ceiling. I almost booked a flight back home. Then I opened my phone and looked at a photo of Grace I had found online. She was laughing, bright eyes, full heart. And I thought about everything she did not know. Everything that had been stolen from her. Not just a sister. 20 years of truth. I put down my phone. I laid my dress on the bed. I closed my eyes. And I told myself tomorrow I was going to do what I should have done a long time ago. The wedding was at 2 in the afternoon. I arrived during cocktail hour. The family estate was exactly as I remembered. White tents, flowers everywhere, soft music playing across the lawn, champagne on silver trays, 200 people dressed in their finest. My parents had always known how to put on a perfect show. No one noticed me at first. I stood near the edge of the tent. I watched the crowd. Family, friends, relatives, neighbors, people who had attended my funeral. People who had hugged my parents and said they were so sorry for their loss. All of them here. All of them still believing the same lie. Then I saw her, Grace. She was standing near the entrance in her wedding dress, white lace, hair pinned up, with tiny flowers. She was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen in my life. She was laughing at something her friend said with her head thrown back and her whole face lit up. And I almost walked away. I almost turned around and let her keep being happy. Let her keep living in a world where her sister died in a car accident 20 years ago, and that was just the sad truth of her life. But then Grace turned, and she saw me. She went completely white. The glass in her hand tilted. Her friend caught it before it fell. Grace's mouth opened and no sound came out. Then she whispered one word. Emma. So quietly, I almost did not hear it. But I heard it, and something inside me broke open. I crossed the tent in 5 steps. The crowd had already started to notice. People were turning, staring, whispering. Someone grabbed their partner's arm. Someone made a short, sharp sound that was not quite a scream but close to it. Grace's knees buckled. Her friend caught her. Someone brought a chair. Grace sat down and stared at me like she was waiting for me to disappear. She kept blinking, kept shaking. I knelt down in front of her and I said, "I am real. I am here. I am so sorry." Then my mother appeared. Karen moved through the crowd like a cold wind. Pale gold dress, perfect hair, and on her face an expression I had never seen before. Pure terror. She grabbed my arm hard and said through her teeth, "You need to leave." Right now, I looked at her hand on my arm. I looked at her face, and 20 years of silence rose up inside me, and I said no. I said, "I'm not leaving until Grace knows the truth." My father arrived next. Older, grayer. He looked smaller than I remembered. He tried to guide me toward the exit. He said, "Please." Like 20 years of lying had earned him a please from me. Grace stood up slowly. Her voice was quiet and steady. She said, "What truth?" She looked straight at me. She said, "Emma." She said, "I went to your funeral. I have visited your grave every single year on your birthday." She said, "What is happening?" So I told her. I told her in front of everyone. My voice did not shake. I told them about the financial documents I found in my father's office, about the embezzlement, about the tea my mother gave me that put me to sleep, about waking up at Aunt Lisa's house in another state, about the choice I was given at 15 years old, about the name I changed, the life I built, and the 20 years I stayed away because I was afraid of what they would do if I came back. 200 people stood completely still. No one spoke. My mother called me a liar. She called me unstable. She said I was always a problem child. She used every word she had. And then a voice came from the back of the crowd. Detective Harris. He had investigated my death 20 years ago. He was a wedding guest. He pushed through the crowd slowly and stopped in front of me and said, "I filed your death report myself. You were 15 years old." I said yes. There was no accident. They sent me away because I knew too much. The police arrived within the hour. Aunt Lisa was contacted. She had kept everything. Documents, letters, records, 20 years of proof in a filing cabinet. My father broke down on the lawn of his own property. He sat in a white wedding chair with his face in his hands and said, "I am sorry," over and over. My mother said nothing. Not to the officers. Not to Grace. Not to me. Grace did not get married that day. She postponed the wedding. She sat with me in my hotel room until 2 in the morning, still in her dress, and we talked until we had nothing left. She cried so hard she gave herself a headache. She said, "Emma, I talked to your grave. I told you everything. My first job. My first heartbreak. When Daniel proposed. I told you because I thought somehow you could still hear me. I said I am so sorry. I said I thought about you every single day." She reached across and took my hand, and she held it. And neither of us said anything for a long time. My parents lost their reputation, their community standing. The legal investigation into the embezzlement was reopened, and this time there was enough evidence to move forward. None of that gave me satisfaction. I just felt tired. And then slowly I felt something else entirely. Free. Grace and I talk every single day now. She calls on her lunch break just to tell me something small. A funny thing. A bad recipe. A show I should watch. 20 years of small things we never got to share. We are making up for lost time. She asked me to be her maid of honor at the rescheduled wedding. I said yes before she finished the sentence. I have no relationship with my parents. I am at peace with that. Some things cannot be forgiven. They can only be survived. And sometimes surviving means walking into a room full of people who believed a lie and saying out loud, "This is what actually happened. I came back from the dead." And I have never felt more alive. If this story moved you, please subscribe to her words right now and share it with someone who needs to hear it. New stories every week. Because every woman has a truth worth telling.